On today's episode of the show, I'm really excited to be talking some man coverage technique and kind of principles and ideas around man to man with Ottawa U coach Nate Taylor. Coach, thanks for being on the show today and making some time, even though OUA coaches just got into their summer with
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
done for the month, but for making time on that first day off to talk to us about man coverage. So appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's awesome. I think you're doing a great job of just kind of informing coaches and young players. So I'm really excited. I've been watching a lot of your stuff, so I'm excited to kind of be here and be a part of it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I've been super fortunate. So many, good coaches have given up their time to talk to players across the country. So, excited to be doing more of that today. Just kind of give, the people watching and listening a little bit on your background and, how you got to Ottawa U and kind of what you've been doing as a coach there with the GeeGee's.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Montreal, played for the LaSalle Warriors back in the day. Then I went to Vanier. A lot of people know the CEGEP system in Quebec. So I was at Vanier for 3 years. We won 2 Bowl D'Ors, which was fun. Then I was Concordia, played there 4 years, 3 years as a corner, 1 year as a free safety. I was picked up as a free agent by the Montreal Alouettes. I was there for probably 16 and a half days or something like that. I played one preseason game, got released. And right when I got released, my former head coach, Jerry McGrath, asked me if I wanted to be the defensive back coach there. So I obviously took that job almost immediately. I was there for 3.5 years and then got the call from the University of Ottawa. Coach Breezy at the time was interested in me as a coach. And then we had a good chat. And he took me on staff as a specialist coordinator, recruiting coordinator, and defensive backs coach. And then I most recently switched to receivers coach. So I still have the 3 other titles, but now I coach receivers as opposed to defensive back. So most of my knowledge is in defensive back play because I'm a lifetime defensive back. Played DB since I was 8 years old or something like that. So and then all through CEGEP, all through University, most of my coaching career, coach at East West. I was the defensive backs coach there as well. So the bulk of my knowledge is in coaching defensive backs.
Yeah, I think it's cool. And it's something that I think is starting to become more popular, like as people get into coaching at a younger age, and develop as a coach kind of earlier on, and more young guys are getting opportunities. There's more guys who are coaching on both sides of the ball, or may have played one side of the ball. Like our receivers coach at Laurier, Steve Frake, he was a DB, on our '05 team that won a Vanier. So I've been lucky enough to work with some guys. It's a really interesting perspective because you're coaching a position that you've spent your whole life dealing with on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
I think it's a really cool way it's a super fun way to, keep learning new things in the game,
Mm-hmm.
but also to kind of, take what you spent your whole life learning and kind of flip it the other way and use it to your advantage that way. So I think it's cool. And it gives a great perspective too. Like now when you're talking about whether it's, man coverage or whatever it is, you kind of have that offensive perspective as well, which I think is super helpful.
Yeah, no, it's been a blast. I've had a ton of fun working with my guys. Like you said, the process is just learning. It's like you're like a kid again. You know what I mean? Everything's brand new. So it's been a ton of fun working with the guys. And like you said, it's nice to just try and develop as a coach and just see from a different angle, right? I bring something different to the table than a lifelong receiver. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, I think it's such a good perspective, and obviously a huge part of playing DB and even probably coaching receivers is understanding man coverage, right? Whether
Yes,
it's defense
sir.
coverage or playing man coverage. And I'm an offensive lineman, so probably the last thing I'd ever want to do on a football field is play man coverage on a receiver. So this is not a topic that I come to naturally, but kind
Mm-hmm.
of like you were saying, I mean, I grew up playing defense and then moved to the offensive side of the ball.
Oh, okay.
I played D line mostly in high school and then moved to O line university. But man coverage for me is always one of those things where I see some teams that play it and they're so successful, and often because they have great players, but also I think there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
more than that that goes into consistently being successful. And then I've seen as an offensive coach, like, oh, we have man-to-man matchup, that gets us excited. And sometimes I hear defensive coaches go, yeah, well, we're just as good with that matchup too. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? So
exactly.
for you, and obviously playing defense and having a great defense, you got to be able to do more than one thing. But for you, what does man-to-man give you in terms of a weapon as a defensive coach, and why do you, why or when do you look to use it as a defensive coach?
Yeah, so for me, man, there's quite a few things that kind of help. So I think if you go from the mental side, what's up from the mental side, one is it's very simple. As a concept onto itself, it's it's me versus you. I know who I have. There can be some switch rules, but if you take those out of the equation, it's a very simple concept. Like if you go to coach 8-year-olds, you can put in man in like a day in terms of the concept anyway, right? So that's one thing that makes it really nice that if things, I see a lot of DCs will use it if their defense gets a little rattled to kind of settle everyone out. Like there's been a bust somewhere, you go to man, everyone regains their confidence, they're back in good minds again. It's just essentially just running around with guys. So huge thing is just the concept is simple. There's very few busts as long as it's not too many motions, obviously, and switches or banjos. Another great thing is, like you said, if you have great athletes, because it's a pro and a con for me. It relies heavily on athleticism and technique. So if you have phenomenal athletes, like you're across the board, got lockdown corners and a couple All-Canadians, you can run a ton of man, right? But if your defensive backs are more of a liability athletically, they're going to struggle against stronger, more athletic receivers. So it can be a strength. I've coached teams and I've been on teams with phenomenal man coverage skills at 2 or 3 spots, and I've been on teams and coached teams where it might be one guy is a great man guy and the other guys are more of a liability, but they may be a phenomenal zone defensive backs, which is just as valuable or can be just as valuable as a man cover guy. So it also allows you to bring pressure. So the pressure thing is one of the things I think entices the defensive coordinators the most. Like the concept being simple is obviously fun, and having good athletes that can do it is awesome, but it's the ability to bring pressure, right? And be sound while you're bringing pressure. So you zone blitz, now you got a vacant area or a vacant zone for it to work out. So you can bring that pressure and your sound system wise, there's a hat on a hat, everyone's covered. They can bring your Will back or your Sam or your free and flip over, rotate, you get everyone covered up. So for me, those are the 3 things that are most advantageous. Just it's simple. It can rely on athleticism, which can be a bonus for teams that have great athletes. And it allows us to bring a ton of pressure and kind of rattle the defensive back and cause protection issues with the O-line and the running back. So that's what I think are the main things. And then there should be very few busts in man coverage, right? So that's what I think is best about it. It allows guys that flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think, because oftentimes, and my dad is a longtime high school defensive coordinator.
Oh.
And we usually had we had really good defensive players, especially when I was there. But usually we would have a hard time scoring on offense. So we would just give the best athletes, go play receiver, and then we'd steal them for a little bit. And they, we'd teach them to play some man stuff. And so we were always kind of nervous, or at least I mean, being the coach's son, I knew at least. I don't know if the other guys knew, but we were trying to stay out of man a lot because usually we had good guys in the box and we had good DBs, but we weren't necessarily we didn't have those guys, like our corners weren't the best players on our defense. So we're trying to, help them out and that kind of stuff. And some of the teams that I've coached in Cambridge, we've had good DBs as well, but not necessarily like they've been good because of their ability to be versatile and intelligent and that type of thing. But when you get the chance to bring the pressure, I think that's like a great equalizer, because if you can affect the quarterback's ability to find the matchup that he wants and deliver the ball accurately and timing, like I've seen a ton of throws that, the guy's open, but the quarterback doesn't get it on him, right? Or he's not able to get to the matchup. Like the matchup you're afraid of as the defensive coordinator, that guy's running a 15-yard dig and he's never going to get the ball. So I think that's something as I've kind of come from a place of, I tend to be defensively a little more conservative. I think I've felt the burn of that sometimes in the last couple of years, like not bringing as much pressure because I don't want to be in man. And so I think that point is huge. Like if you look at it in isolation, like it's not one-on-ones. You know what I mean? It's still 12 guys. And while it's built on one-on-one matchups, it's not a one-on-one drill. There's that element of pressure, which I think is huge.
I agree with your point. Like you're making a good point. So even when you're teaching, man, I think something that gets kind of forgotten is this is a kind of a deeper thing, is the DBs have to understand the premise under which we're playing man coverage, right? That we're bringing that pressure. So a lot of DBs, I don't say they panic, but they don't realize that we should be getting hit home. You should be able to hit home. Where we're going to bring a little bit of pressure. You're not expected to cover for 4 seconds. Like it's not zone. You're not going to be looking at the quarterback. Like your job as a man. And I think for me personally, I think it's very important, especially with DBs, maybe outside of the whole defensive unit, is they have to understand, you have to instill the confidence that if the quarterback does, say, break contain, or they pick up the blitz perfectly and the receiver runs like a double move, let's say, it's your fault to a certain degree, but at the same time, the other half of the defense didn't do what they were supposed to do, right? The concept of defense didn't hold true. So you ended up being in a poor situation because we didn't get home, or they picked up, or someone blitzed the wrong gap. We had two guys in the same gap. They get picked up easily. So I think it's important that when you're coaching, when you're teaching it to the guys, they have a responsibility. Like, that's your guy. Whatever happens is your fault, in quotations, obviously. But there's still responsibility for the rest of the defense to kind of hold their end of the bargain, right? Get that pressure and try to create a little bit of havoc. So I think but like you said, if you have good defensive ends or you can get a good box, you can play a ton of man. Like, my first year when I was at Vanier, I played with three CFLers, no, three Division I players, and then all three of them became CFLers. So Jesse Joseph, Amit Paul, and Hassan Hassime. And I was a rookie, and we played a ton of man, and I thought I was all world. So I was fresh off all world. But Amit Paul that year, we ended up going to Wofford and then played for Winnipeg Wilmars. He broke the season sack record, and Hassan Hassime ended up going to Akron and then Wake Forest and played at Hamilton for a few years. He was like second on the sack record. So they were bringing so much pressure. I thought I was all world, but the quarterback had no time to throw. And in retrospect, as a coach, when I went back and thought about how good I thought I was, I quickly realized it's because the quarterbacks had no chance. The balls were out so quickly I could sit at 5 yards and just break downhill and everything, where a fade was thrown in like the first second and a half because they couldn't take a 5-step because our ends were so freaking good. So you made a very good point in saying that if you have a good front step, you can also play that man in the back if you can consistently make that pressure, create that pressure.
Yeah, and it solves some problems for you. Like, I always find, like, for me, I feel more secure in zone, but then it's like you're creating problems either way.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's such a good topic. You brought up a great point when we were kind of talking about, okay, what are we going to talk about today? And that's how different is playing man coverage if you're, you mentioned that you played the corner to start your career and then moved inside to free safety. If you're playing man kind of across the board as a DB, like, what changes based on position, whether you're at, you're manning up a wideout who's probably on the line of scrimmage, or you're manning up, a guy in the slot at a halfback spot, or, the safety, like we were talking about, bringing pressure. Like, if the safety is replacing a blitzer in man coverage, what are kind of like the considerations you got to make, and some of like the technical changes that you'd, encourage guys to look at based on where they're lining up on defense?
Yeah, so it's all predicated on essentially two things. The ease of the throw for the quarterback and where your help lies, right? So if you're playing corner in a cover one concept, so you're a free safety high, you're isolated, halfback inside of you, your help is the sideline because he can't run out of bounds, right? He's out of bounds, he can't catch the ball, obviously. And the safety is too far away from you, and he's responsible for the hashes. So he's gonna protect the halfback. So you will not have help from that free safety. So you want to do everything you can to deny the inside release. So your help is aside, so you're going to line inside. And the hardest throw for the quarterback, the harder throw is that out-breaking route to the wide out. Say the wide out's 20, 18 yards out the box. He's going to run it out. It's a long throw, and the ball's in the air for a very long time, which gives the corner the ability to break on that route and make a play on the ball. So whenever you're the corner, more times than not, if you're playing cover one or cover zero, it doesn't matter really. You're going to be inside shade, 5 to 7 yards off. And you want to entice, you want to allow that outside breaking route, because most teams won't throw, especially if you're in the field. If you're a field corner, like they're not throwing that field out, because that's like a CFL, NFL, it's a pro throw for the most part, right? But even into that boundary, you don't see very many teams take a ton of shots that field out to that wide out. It's very limited space. The timing is tough. If you're a halfback, and so you're one of the interior guys, same goes for Sams or Wills, depending on the coverage. You're going to have a free safety in the middle of the football field, so he's your help because the corner, the outside, the sideline's too far away for it to be very helpful for you. So you're going to line outside shade. So you want to entice him to go in towards your help, right? And then you also have help, which is nice, is that you also have help from a backer more times than not. Even if he's not keying that route, the fact that he exists in that space, because he'll be, say, 4 to 5 yards inside of you. If they want to throw a slant in front, if you guys are in zone, or if not in zone, if you guys are droppers or they're just reading it back and the back hasn't released, his presence creates an issue for the quarterback in making that throw. They can make it, but it's still, they have to consider it. So the halfback will line outside shade and entice all those in-breaking routes, because the tough throw for the halfback to defend is that corner route. Because going to like a whole heap of space, the quarterback can just kind of lob it up, and the free safety can't cover that same ground the same way you wouldn't be able to help a wide receiver running a fade route. So like I said, you want to take it away. In this case, the easier throw for the quarterback is that corner up because there's a lot of room for adjustment. It's just all the way out there. Kind of you don't huck it, but you throw it out to space and you allow that slot back to kind of run underneath it. And then when he catches that, the free safety is too far away to really make a play on it. So those are kind of, in terms of leverages, that's what you're looking at. And then when it comes to depth, corners are generally about 7 yards, 7, 8 yards. If you're in the field, you might be 10, 12 because there's so much room. If you're in the boundary, 7, 5, 7, depending on how athletic you are. Halfbacks generally don't go any deeper than 5 because, again, the easy throw for the quarterback is the hook. Anything short or outbreaking from the slots is like a kind of like a money play. So those are easy balls to get in really well. So you'll line that halfback about maybe 3 to 5. Some teams do it 3, 5 yards to get hands on, and then that way they can't just throw hooks all up and down that football field. Whereas in on the outsides for the corners, they can't. It's hard to throw hooks to the wide out. Like, you can't do it over and over again. He'll eventually jump on it, right? So those are kind of the leverages inside and out. So I call them horizontal leverages. Everyone calls them they're horizontal leverages. So inside and outside, and then the vertical leverages just be 5 yards, 3 to 5 for the halfbacks, and 5 to 7. If you're in the field, maybe 12. If you're in the boundary, it could be up to 10.
Yeah, and I think that those are the little things, especially like talking to athletes. Like one of the things I was excited about for this episode, because we talk a lot about we usually pick like a topic, right? So whether it's quarters coverage or inside zone or something like that. Yeah. And so usually it's a little more like schematic and it's a little more towards coaches. And we're trying now, and this is one of the good ones for it, to have a few more that are like a little more athlete centered. Mm-hmm. And everyone runs some kind of man, right? Like you're not going to find – you're not going to – it's like as a receiver, like everyone's offense has a slant. Like everyone, everyone's going to have man coverage. And like you said, obviously, depending on the level you're playing at and whether you're in the field or the boundary, like there's going to be things that change. But like understanding where your help is. And like for me as a center, the concept that like, the sideline is my help, that's like so far out of my wheelhouse. But
yeah,
it's interesting. And when you think of it, because I just always think like, man, there's so much space out there. Like, it's like a basketball court, but there's 10 of them in a row, and this guy can go wherever he wants. But he can't really, right, with the structure of an offense and kind of the leverage that you take is hopefully forcing him to a situation that, it makes it a lot more challenging for him and the quarterback to execute. You kind of touched on, a couple different types of man there already. Like we've talked about whether you're playing like cover 0 or, cover 1, and you talked about like linebackers like dropping – potentially off the back or whatever it is. What kind of like, obviously there's different, like you see all the time in like the American game, like press coverage is a big deal. And people do it up here as well. Like the waggles, I would imagine quite tough in that case. But, if you were going to break down like the big umbrella of man coverage into like a couple different versions, like what would be kind of your go-to, types of man coverage that you like to use? And then, like what type of situation or technique would you use like with those? Like how would playing press differ than playing, off inside leverage man?
Yeah. So I'd break it down into like 2 main categories and there's like a couple subcategories. So there's like off man, which is kind of like general. And you can play it a little different ways, but it doesn't change a ton. Just your leverages will change. And then you can play press man, and you can play it either out of a cover 1, cover 0, or a 2-man look. So 2-man would be like a trail man. So that's like the third one that some teams play with not a ton of. So the 2 main ones are off and press. There's kind of minor variations depending on what leverages you guys want to use. It's always going to be focus on your help versus the strength of the throw. So off man, the great thing about off man is the same thing. Everyone's locked up. It's much easier to defend vertical routes, right? As soon as you get into a press situation, like a lot of the quarterbacks, the offensive coordinators, like they tap their head or something, it's a go. Like everyone's just going to, the wideouts are just gone. It's a track meet. So if you're in that off coverage, what the nice thing about it is it gives you that cushion. It gives you room to work. You can still break on most short routes, but you still have the ability to take away a lot of their deeper throws. Guys are locked up. So a big thing in man is having a great back pedal. So it doesn't have to be a lot of young players, especially, are focused on a really fast back pedal. You don't necessarily want to back pedal too fast. You create more of a separation in terms of your vertical leverage, right? So if you're, say the receiver's running at like 80% and you're backpedaling at 110%, you guys will never meet. And that way he can run like a 15-yard comeback and you're essentially 25 yards away, right? It's an exaggeration, but you don't want to give them all that room. You eventually need to take the space away, right? So you have a good controlled back pedal, good pad level, obviously. And then the second biggest thing is just maintaining your leverage. So that's that same deal, and that's done with your weave. So it's just like essentially a side like a mini side shuffle while backpedaling and maintaining that leverage. So don't gonna come too far across. We're trying to gain ground and still work with our back pedal while maintaining our inside leverage. So in my opinion, those are like the two. Actually, the main thing in management, I should have mentioned before, is just eye discipline. That's like the most crucial things that a player needs to work on. A lot of players even I deal with now have terrible eye discipline in the sense that they're always looking for the ball. They're getting lost in the backfield, and it creates issues that don't necessarily need to exist, right? Because that's how you get beat on a double move. Like, got to break for a hook, and your eyes like flash the quarterback, and you don't know these are gone back up the football field, right? So the big thing is that if you create really good eye discipline, you're always tracking your man, and it's like wherever he goes, you go. Your eyes are locked to his hip. And a big thing that I can't remember a coach told me this, but in man coverage, everyone's interceptions. Interceptions are phenomenal, but the goal is incompletions and breakups. In my opinion, man, like if you get an interception, great job. I'm not telling anyone not to get an interception, but no one really calls man expecting a pick. If you get it, phenomenal. You know what I mean? Like, it's a great job. Everyone's happy about it, but we're not calling mans like, oh, we're gonna get a pick in this man play. It's like, if you get a pick, obviously something's gone really well for you. But if we train our guys to think more breakups and incompletions, now their eyes are better. They're not getting their eyes back and looking for a ball. Whereas in zone, by all means, stare at the quarterback, read your routes, and now we're ball hawks. We're out there trying to get that ball. So, like I said, I'll go back to the off-man thing. So the two main things is just maintaining that leverage and having a good pack pedal, having good eye discipline. And then there's a whole host of like minor details in terms of whether you want a T-step or foot fire or machine gun. So for me personally, I know it's very polarizing in the DB world. Is like, are you a T-step guy, which is, if you know, it's like you're taking steps back, you plant your foot your foot away from the way you're going on a 45-degree angle, you drive off that leg. Or if you're a foot fire guard, machine gun, however you want to call it, you come back and all your feet keep that motion going in that direction. And me personally, I've always coached it whatever is most efficient for the player. Some guys just can't. They're just not very good at one or the other. They have to choose one that they excel at. So I was a good T-step guy when I was playing, I felt. And I tried the whole machine gun. It just didn't – my mechanics and the way I was built, it wasn't real good. So I've always loved my guys to do whatever they want in terms of that. It just – if it's not good, we'll switch it. But if you're efficient and you're breaking our routes and it looks good, we'll keep that going. So your eye discipline, your brakes, so all your 45-90s, how you use your either foot fire or T-step. And then another big thing is just how you open your hips in terms of driving on vertical routes and creating that gaining that separation or closing that gap on guys. So having great hips is a huge factor. Guys with stiff hips a lot of times will get beat vertically because they can't flip open and run as well as some other guys. So I could go on for probably like hours, but there's just so many different things I'm trying to get to you guys. But I think that's kind of it. I think there's probably a few more things I could have brought up, but
yeah, I think the T-step thing is an interesting, because I've as I've kind of tried to keep learning the game and being a head coach in the summer, like if someone can't come to practice, it's like, hey, you're coaching this position today, you know what I mean? And that is that's summer football, right? That is what it is. So I love the concept, and it's kind of similar. Like, O-line's such a weird world because nothing's natural, so it's kind of like you feel okay like breaking habits because like no one does any of it the right way naturally.
Yeah.
Or not a lot of guys that I've been around. But I feel like other positions you kind of want to play into your guys' like natural strength. It's kind of like messing with like a basketball player's shot. Like, yeah, you want it to be efficient, but like if they're making them, like you don't want them to not make them. So it's an interesting kind of, like you said, it's nice to have, if you as the coach have that understanding of like multiple ways of doing it and then saying, hey, this isn't working for you, like try this. Because I think one of the demoralizing things for players, and I see this all the time with high school guys, is when you're like, no, like you got to do it this way, and they just can't do it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, I guess I just can't play.
Yeah.
And then you get these really good athletes that are like underperforming, but you really have only given them like one tool.
Yeah.
You know, and you obviously like that's the art of coaching. Probably like you can't give a kid 9 ways to do something because they won't be good at any of them.
Mm-hmm.
But you also don't want to like pencil them into, hey, we're going to play man and everyone's going to T-step because I don't want to bother coaching the other one. So you're
Yeah.
all just going to T-step. And for 4 of your guys, they love it, and the other guy's like, oh, I guess I'm just not good at this.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great way to go. And for coaches,
Yeah.
like especially young coaches, like I've just found myself like I'll watch, like I was watching like a bunch of Penn State running back cut-ups, and they do
Nice.
some stuff that and obviously they've had amazing guys like
Yeah.
Saquon, Miles Sanders, and the guy they got right now is like all the juice in the world. It's like 100 guy. And so they'll do some stuff. I'm like, oh, like we could do that footwork, or like we could try and do that. And you could, like as a young coach, you start like you learn it from a coach you really respect.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, we're gonna do everything like this way, and then you get kind of penciled into like only doing it one way. You're not letting your guys do like what they do best. So like I'm always kind of guarded against that, and that's a great point.
Well, I'll mention one more thing on that, and this is where I realized this as a player because I had someone try and change my technique, and the issue is it's great to try, but when the bullets start flying, you're gonna revert back to what you're most comfortable doing, right? So I've seen coaches where they drill, do this way, do it that way. But when you go back and watch the game film, the whole film is done the other way. The way that they've done it their entire lives, the way they're most comfortable. So there's diminishing returns, but you're not really in practice. They might be doing it, but comes game time, like it's your instinct. You flash, you do well, and that's what you're gonna do. So it's kind of like you said, you get a balancing act. That's one thing I realized as a player. I was asked to do one thing, and then the bullets started flying. I had to break on a ball, and I broke the way I've broke for the last like 10 years of my life. I just couldn't I unlearned it, but it's my instincts, it's how I react, right? So gotta be careful with that.
Yeah, I think especially, when you're dealing with guys that like have a lot of natural athleticism, the last thing you want to do is, make them inefficient because you want to do it your way. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
And especially like playing man's got to be one of the more stressful situations, right? Like guys are definitely going to revert back to, if they feel like, hey, this is how I'm going to get to where I need to go, like that's what they're going to do. So I think, that's a really good point. In terms of, and this was kind of coming off that question, and, we didn't talk about this necessarily before, but like when you're coaching guys to switch, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe you don't. I'm kind of getting the cart ahead of the horse here, but like if you get routes that break across each other, whether it's like, slant or flat or post and corner, like two verticals, like as an offensive guy, the stuff we're always trying to, get people in man and then make them do that, right? What are your coaching points for guys in that situation, or like tips for coaches on like good ways to like rep that in practice?
Yeah, so for me, the biggest thing, it's probably one of the hardest things we do as defensive backs because zone is relatively easy. It's the switching. The biggest thing is communication. There has to be a clear line of communication. It's one of those things where that's one of the things I'm probably most strict on is that like if you're calling switch, the switch is happening, only one guy calls it because you can get it gets lost in communication. Everyone's seen it on film where on the field where there's two guys on one and there's a guy running free and like what happened here and they messed up the switch. You know what I mean? So when in doubt, don't switch. Like if you're not sure, just lock on. But it's got to be a very clear line of communication. And ideally, there's a precursor. So if you check switch, then you'll call switch, as opposed to just saying switch. And at the corners, he's locked in, he's on his man. So if you don't give him a warning or notify him ahead of time, I think that's where you get into more of the issues. Aside from that, it's just you want to play your guys on different levels. That's super important. So if you have both your guys at 5 yards, and then so this is an any man situation more or less. If you have both guys at 5 yards and they get like a flattened out, if they might run into each other, so you might get locked up. So you just want to be where have one guy at 3, one guy at 5, so you can kind of facilitate the switch. And then it's also just good eye discipline. So it's just a lot of trust because it's one of those things that physically it's probably one of the easiest thing a DB can do because you just stop running and you let the guy like come to you and you just pick him up and you keep on going. It's a very physically almost any like me and you can run a switch concept on like DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones. Like right now, it's not hard because they're running towards us. We picked they'd run past us after that. We picked them up for a split second.
In time, though. For a moment in time.
You know what I mean? So it's physically it's very easy, but it's the mental aspect. It's having two guys that communicate well, that have a good relationship, to understand it, and then in practice, the easiest way is just to run a bunch of 2-man, 3-man switches and just to kind of really get the reps. show it to them on film so they know what to expect from specific teams in the situations that they'll do it in. Ideally, the best situation is when they show the switch ahead of time. So there's some kind of motion that indicates the switch may be coming so we can be alert to it. And most teams have to, because if you're too far away, the switch doesn't make sense. If you guys are split, like, say, 8 yards apart, it's tough to switch that deep. So ideally, there more times than not, they will come together, be in a 2 to 3 yard mark forward maybe, and then they'll run a switch off of that. What else? Oh, another big thing is having a very clear line as to how deep you can run a switch. Because you can't switch off at 15 yards, right? Most teams, I want to say the deepest they'll switch is maybe like 7, and even that's kind of deep-ish for me. Because you don't want to switch deep vertical pushing routes because they can run away from you now as opposed to coming towards you. So ideally, you're switching routes for like 3 to 5 yards. It's an easy switch off. You pick the guy up, you kind of stay still. He comes to you, carry on your leverage. So I think those are the big things. One thing you cannot underestimate is just the repetition and the communication and having the trust, right? And because you've seen guys, they mess the switch and they start arguing right away. I call switch, you didn't call switch, I call switch. Like, I didn't hear it, say it louder. And it's a whole big argument. So if you get those reps in practice, you have the time, you can kind of build that trust and that relationship. And you can start banjoing and switching routes.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And like, I know it's one of those things where, like, again, like it's kind of like, as a coach, it stresses you out because you know, like, there's that potential for a mistake. But I also know as like an offensive guy, it's like, man, when you run a route concept and we got the guys in man, we're like, great, we're gonna run, push through post. You know what I mean? Like, we've been running that forever, and we know, okay, we got man, great. And then if even if it's once or twice on film, like, they run a nice switch, you're like, man, like, we might throw that guy the ball. Like, we 100%. Might, and then it kind of gets in your head, like, hey, we saw this one good switch on film where, like, the quarterback kind of double clutch one early in the game because they ran that switch. It kind of deters you from, like, putting them back in that situation because it's kind of high risk, I guess, but it's also, it's a high reward thing. Like you said, if you can execute it, it simplifies the job versus, like, fighting through a pick or getting to where you need to get to on a guy that might put you in a tough leverage position when you got to work around somebody else. So kind of like last question, and you've actually, you've already addressed kind of some of these things as we've gone, which I think is great. Like, common mistakes. So, like, when your guys are struggling, and man, other than, hey, like, they're guarding Julio Jones and Julio Jones by him, is what it is. But in terms of when you got guys that are struggling in man, or when they're having a tougher day, like, what are the mistakes that you usually see, and how do you kind of try and either coach that out or drill that out, in practice, hopefully before it happens?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest mistake I see, and it's the thing that I find DBs work on the least by themselves, is it's eye discipline. Like I mentioned earlier, you'll see, even in the NFL, you'll see guys just staring in the backfield, or they're breaking and they don't know where the receiver is, and they get their eyes off the hit. So for me, and when you go to the field with your boys, you're just going to run cone drills. That's what guys do. They run cone drills. None of those cone drills work on your eye, just in where your eyes have to be and where you have to track the hip. So I think for me personally, that's the biggest thing. It's just, and I think it can be undercoached at times because they just want to see interceptions. They don't force the kid to run. It's like we'll do a drill. You're breaking, but you have the first 3 to 5 steps, and I'll go to like 6. Because if you say, as a coach, this, if you say 3, you're going to get 2. If you say 5, you're going to get 4. So if you get 6, you might get 3. So the big thing is that if you force them to really hold it, and they're just snapping their head and they're just driving, like, snap your head, drive, because where your head goes, your shoulders go, your hips go, so you're fast that way. So you're snapping, you're driving, and when I do the drill, I have to make them understand the ball will come late. Like, don't worry about me throwing the ball early. I'll give you the time to cover the ground, and then the ball will come, so you'll still get your catch in. So I think that's a pretty big thing. Another thing is, what was the last thing? Ball drills, pad level. I think pad level is a huge thing. A lot of players, they rise up, and it's when you get on your pad level, you rise up, you end up on your heels. So any kind of transitions are terrible. You know what I mean? So, like, we'll do drills where it's literally just we're backpedaling, and every coach and every DB coach probably does it. So you're backpedaling, you're just changing the speed of the pedal. So you use your hand, like, we're going fast, we're going to go slow, and we'll say, like, we'll go 30%, 50%. We ask your kid to go, like, 70%, he starts raising up. And as soon as you raise up, if you need to break on a hook, you got to transfer all that way back down to come downfield, right? If you want to go, and even worse so, if you want to break on a vertical route, which is more dangerous for us, you're kind of falling back, so you have no power to drive out of breaks. You'll open your hips okay-ish because you're kind of leaning back, which isn't the end of the world. But when it comes to getting into your drive phase and covering that ground, you're no longer capable, right? Because ideally, a lot of coaches will teach when they're breaking on a vertical route, they're driving that hip down and away to bring that shoulder down. So when they do get their hips around, they're in almost a sprinter stance or like a half sprinter stance. So that transition is super important. So I think those are some of the bigger things I think aren't taught a ton. The rest of the stuff is like have good footwork, like your T drill. But those are things like players do actually, in my opinion, do a pretty good job of working. There's a ton of footage out there, a ton of videos. And every time I see a recruit or a player working on doing drills by themselves, they're just doing their transitions and their breaks, which is awesome. But I think as coaches, they won't feel their pad level more times than not, right? They won't see the distinction in their pad level. But as a coach, you can have an eye for it. So that's something that needs to be coached really hard. So I think the eyes and the pad level are two of the most important things in terms of the smaller things. Because if I say working your T-step, like you're going to work, everyone works on a T-step, right? Keeping your feet close, staying within your cylinder, not getting too wide. Those are kind of more obvious points, but I think those two things are things that coaches see more so than players, and coaches are more readily able to coach that point up as opposed to a DB should feel if his plant step on his T-step is too far away, he's kind of get like stuck in the mud. You can't, and you feel it feels like really like feels terrible as a DB, but you feel that a really sluggish and slow transition. Whereas if you have your feet tight, you kind of feel how more explosive you are, so they can coach that themselves. But eyes, they can't coach because they won't. And then in the pad level, they might not feel it if they're raising up within their own pedal. So those are two of the main things.
That's huge. And I always think the best coaching points I find are the ones like before you make a mistake. Like, what did you do that like led to that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. It's funny, like the O-line world is very similar. Like obviously pad level is crucial for us.
Mm-hmm.
But, there's oftentimes like a guy will get beat and there'll be like a big problem. Like you said, for T-step for you guys is like set punch for us. Like everyone's doing that. You know what I mean? But usually like when you have a problem with set punch, it's not because you suck at your set or you don't know how to use your hands. It's because your body was in a bad position by the
100%.
like before you got in that contact point, or for you guys before you had to break and drive or flip your hips. And so I think those are always the great, like as a player, like you said, those are the things that you don't necessarily like recognize, right? And it makes all the difference. Like we talk all the time about like you've won or lost the rep before you put your hands on the other guy, right?
Yeah,
and
100%.
You can't necessarily win, I guess, the rep before you put your hands on the guy as an O-lineman. But I watch guys, if you can finish your first year as a freshman offensive lineman and you're not losing the rep before you put your hand on the guy, like that's a good spot.
Yes,
and I feel like in listening to you talk about those little things and how they often are like totally on you, right? Like nothing can theoretically take your eyes off the ball or off the man if you don't let it.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Your pad level, it's not like someone starts pushing you up. You know what I mean? Like that's you, and I think that as a player, sometimes it like sucks when you get those coaching points because you're like, man, like that's me. You know what I mean? Like that's on me. But it's also like it empowers you because you control that, right? Yeah. You can't control if you're playing against an all-Canadian or not, but you can control your pad level and your your eye discipline like you talked about, and the other things will take care of themselves. Kind of last question, and something that I know my guys in Cambridge, we haven't done a ton of, but I'd be interested in kind of hearing your take on it. But like playing press man, like when do you encourage it? And like what's your main, like obviously we've talked about the eye discipline and that stuff already. What's different in press man than obviously there's the obvious things, but like as a coach, like what are you preaching if your guy's going to go press? Like when are you okay with that, or when do you encourage it? And like what are the main coaching points that are specific to playing that press man technique?
Yeah, so press is it's like super high risk, super high reward, right? So the biggest thing for the way I conceptualize press, and I explain to my DBs, is we're trying to either take away time or take away space. Time in the sense if we get hands on a player early, he's not running his route. He's dealing with us, right? Or if he takes a million steps off the line of scrimmage, he's not in his stem, he's not working his route. He's on us. So if you got a three-step drop with like a slant or whatever, and he's pitter-pattering at the line, the quarterback might get to the top of his drop and he's not where he's expecting to be. Now we've created an incompletion because the quarterback is off his rhythm. We might get a pressure or a sack. And you want to take away space in the sense that like if we're corners, we'll always be inside leverage. We want to force him to go around us. We're trying to take. We can't allow. We call it, a lot of guys call it opening a gate. I call it so opening a gate is you just kind of literally turn and run, and you guys turn it into a track meet. So that's my coaching point always. I'm like, don't turn it into a track meet because you're facing the wrong way. You know what I mean? Like you're already a step and a half, 2 steps behind, and you can't just let him run because like you're facing that way, you're facing this way. He's taking off. You got to make sure that you force him around you and take away that space, and now work to squeeze him into that sideline. So like those are some of the main coaching points or concepts. And I think one of the big coaching points is it's always feet first. Like you were speaking about O-line. It's literally like when you said the whole set punch thing, I thought press man. That's what it is. It's all about staying square. I think it's like, I'm not sure if you guys stay square to line squares. I feel like you kind of do.
At Laurier, we do. That's a huge – we're different than a lot of people. Like,
okay,
we're very – like, our pass set is – and I do it with my running backs too, and I think a lot of people think we're nuts. But, I don't like opening the gate in pass pro because, it like, same thing. Like, I don't want to let him run. You know what I mean? Like, I want to deal with him, like, in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so we are very there's schools of thought for sure, but
of course, yeah,
you know, and with O-line it's a little different because like he can't just run to the end zone; he's got to come to the quarterback. You know, like we know where the route ends. You know what I mean? But so it's not totally the same, but we do try and stay very square on our set. Yeah,
so for us, it's like for anyone, you're inside leverage, you stay square as long as you possibly can with that cushion. You can't allow him obviously to break in front of your face or get as a corner so you can get inside because it's a very easy completion, right? And then if he wants to go outside or wants to go vertically, we got to get hands on him, wash him up. But like I was saying, it's all in the feet. Like you see, and the thing is, because DBs, they watch like Jalen Ramsey and all these cats just like beat the crap out of like receivers. And it's fun to watch a guy like a DB put hands and but they're not watching the guy's feet because they're so you're attracted to the motion. You see the hand in the sternum, the guy can't run his route, he's getting locked up. But for them to do one, they don't have a yard, so it's much easier to do. It's much easier to play press in the States than it is in Canada. But if you're in Canada, like when we're playing that press, it's all about your feet. Like I've done almost entire like one periods where we press without hands. It's all just mirroring and staying in front. And you're just training the feet to be right because as soon as you take your eyes off your target or your feet are ready, you're not maintaining your leverage, you're gonna be beat. Like your hands aren't strong enough to stop a full-grown man's momentum up the football field unless your body is present, right? Unless you're right in that bench press mode, like thumbs up. They call it the horseshoe, like having that thumb up. Want to fit it right there on the guy. If you're not there, like if you're out here, you might get a PI, obviously, or you're just going to run through your arm, you know what I mean? So you got to be in front as best as you can, strike that hand right into that, we call it a little chest plate here, get on there so you can control him and then wash him out and ride him ideally to that sideline. Or if he tries to cross your face, you got to lock him down. So you can't allow – we would say like deny the inside release. So you got to step in front. You got to jack him. He can't cross your face at all, right? Because there's no time there, right? The slap's going to come fast. Whereas the fade will allow that outside release, go run, shuffle, widen him out, give him a good hand jab, get in his backside hip pocket, and just ride him that football field.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Again, it's so funny. Like what you notice is often like not what is like driving the success, you know, like you're able to get a great strike because you kept your hips in front. It's the same thing with offensive linemen. Like
exactly.
your punch is directly tied to where your hips are, you know? And so that's, I think it's such a valuable point. And it's so hard, like, especially young players, like it's a stressful situation. So like you said at the start, like guys do what they're either used to or because there's so many guys that like haven't played that much football, right? Like two of the best DBs I played high school football with didn't play football till grade 11. They're just two basketball guys that you know ended up being like awesome high school football players. And my one buddy went to Queens, and the other guy, probably the best high school football player I played with, he went to U Victoria, so they didn't have any football. But you know, he just mountain biked, snowboarded his way out there. So you know he had some good times too. But like those guys were awesome, but I could totally see how like if you have kids like that are your best athletes, but you know they've played other sports, a lot of it helps, but some of it's like you're going to revert back to what you think you should do. And oftentimes those are like the big obvious things, not like the little things that help you. Like the point you made about the Jalen Ramsey, you know, knocking guys out of bounds, you know, if you're in a bad body position, like you can't do that. So like trying to do that is often detrimental to you being in the body position you actually need to do it. So
100%.
You know, That's an awesome point, and I really appreciate your time. I think I
My
was kind of
pleasure.
laughing to myself, even when we came on, like this is video I think 56, and this is our
Really?
first man coverage conversation. So
Holy smokes.
that tells you how nervous man coverage makes me that I got to 56 video talking man. But
I hope it was helpful.
yeah, no, it was great, and like I said, I love how athlete focused it was as well. So whether it's coaches who are watching or athletes who are watching, there's lots of good things you can take from that. And all the best this summer, and I'm sure the recruiting grind will start again August 1. But hopefully get some time to relax and enjoy the nice weather.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. Same to you. Enjoy it.